This is a picture of my boxing trainer Jimmy Simmons in his fistic prime, standing next to Joe Louis. Now, there were two fighters that Jimmy always talked to me about with reverence. The first was Joe Louis, and the second was a fighter that has since been forgotten. His name was the Coco Kid. Now, there was some controversy in the gym as the gym's owner claimed to have fought the Coco Kid, but could never provide any evidence of it. And my trainer told me back then that the owner's claim was BS. But my trainer's brother, William, was a really good fighter back in the day, and he did fight the Coco Kid. And my trainer's brother fought under the name of the Cowboy Kid, and he battled to a draw with the Coco Kid back in 1931. So who was the Coco Kid? He was born in Puerto Rico. There are some reports that he was born in Havana, Cuba, but he was born on May 2nd, 1914 to Mertrice Arroyo, a Puerto Rican native, and Louis Hardwick, an American merchant marine. Coco was orphaned when his father disappeared when the USS Cyclops went missing in the Bermuda Triangle during World War I, and his mother died shortly thereafter. Now, the Coco Kid's real name was Louis Hardwick, and he eventually wound up in New Haven, Connecticut at the age of 12. Coco graduated from high school at the age of 16. He was fluent in 5 languages: English, Spanish, French, Latin, and Portuguese. Finding work as a bellhop, he supplemented his income by competing in smokers until 1929 when he turned pro. A rigorous fighting schedule followed. Coco engaged in numerous bouts per month, and boxing's shady operators tried to get their hooks into him early on. In May of 1935, Coco charged that he had been offered $100 to throw his fight against Jimmy Leto. Coco stated that he had been approached by Lou Viscusi 2 days in advance of the fight. Viscusi had posed as an auto salesman and gained entrance into his home. He then offered $100 to Coco to lose the fight, holding out a promise of landing him considerable work in the fight game outside of the state. Coco declared that he would not be a party to any such arrangement and sent an affidavit to the courts concerning the bribe. Now, Viscusi denied that he made such an offer and that he showed up at the house to make sure that the Coco Kid could make the 140-pound weight limit, and that if he couldn't, he would forfeit $100. Now, meanwhile, Coco now started to make a name for himself in the ring. He had a slick and clever style, and some of the old-time writers described him as the second coming of Joe Gans. In 1936, he won the colored welterweight championship against young Peter Jackson. He would later defend against Holman Williams and lose that title to Charlie Burley in 1938. Burley floored Coco in the 2nd and 15th, shutting his eye. Coco staggered Burley in the 4th and 11th, but came up short in a decision loss. But from 1939 to 1940, Coco went on a win streak of over 17 fights against good competition. Boxing writers began to ask why he wasn't getting a title shot, and they salivated over the prospect of him meeting Henry Armstrong for the world welterweight title. Promoters in Baltimore offered Henry Armstrong $25,000 to defend his title against Coco, and Armstrong refused. But Coco's pugilistic dementia may have started kicking in as early as 1942, as after defeating Holman Williams, one reporter described him as looking barbaric, emaciated, and seemed to not have shaved in a week. Charlie Rose, his manager at the time, complained that the Coco Kid could not get fights at Madison Square Garden because the new champion, Freddie Cochran, not to mention Sugar Ray Robinson, wanted nothing to do with him. Lucius Jones, a Mississippi sports writer, felt that the snub had more to do with the fact that the Coco Kid was in an interracial marriage. "You know how such a situation works out," Jones wrote. "That was one of Jack Johnson's major handicaps." In July of 1943, the Coco Kid signed up for a match against Jose Basora, but failed to show up. He apparently feared for his well-being, John Webster wrote. He deliberately ran out on the match. Instead, Coco entered the Navy, but received an early discharge as the military doctors realized that he was suffering from pugilistic dementia. Coco wouldn't reveal the diagnosis to anyone and continued his boxing career upon his discharge. He had gained more than 40 pounds during his year in the Navy, but he slimmed back down to the middleweight division and toured California. The Oakland Tribune described him as, quote, "a battle-scarred veteran," while Art Kahn stated that the Coco Kid has, quote, lost so many fights that historians have lost count. In December of 1944, Coco once again found himself at the center of an alleged fight-fixing scandal. He was charged with faking 4 knockdowns that he suffered at the hands of Oakland Billy Smith in November of that year. The Coco Kid was a heavy favorite going into the fight, but the odds strangely collapsed before the first bell rang, with Smith now as the favorite. The referee stopped the fight in the 3rd round, declaring the fight as a no contest because the Coco Kid, quote, had not put forth his best effort. Coco went down in each of the 3 rounds, and each time the referee refused to count. California Commission Chairman Jules Covey stated that the fight was just one of many of suspicious bouts they experienced over that month. During the hearing, Covey asked Coco if he had ever heard of a man named Abe Phillips. "I've heard the name, but I've never met him," Coco said. Phillips was a bail bondsman in Los Angeles and a friend of L.A. gangster Mickey Cohen, who was suspected of fight fixing. Covey believed that the Coco Kid was intimidated by the gangsters. He withheld his purse and suspended him for 6 months. By 1945, the Coco Kid began losing as much as he won, taking numerous beatings before his final bout in 1948. In 1949, he signed for 2 bouts against Sugar Ray Robinson, but Robinson broke the agreements each time. Coco then accompanied former opponent Tiger Wade to Robinson's training camp and floored Sugar Ray during a sparring session. The incident would be the last time Coco's name hit the news. Lynn Doyle, a Philadelphia sports reporter, wrote, quote, "The Coco Kid speaks 6 languages. Won't he have fun when he reaches the time of life when fighters start talking to themselves?" Doyle's words proved to be prophetic sooner than later. Coco's second wife divorced him and took their children with her. His pugilistic dementia worsened, and he was found wandering the streets of New York, mistakenly believed to be a wino. After some investigation into his identity, he would be admitted into a VA hospital in Chicago. Coco remained there until his death on December 27, 1966. He was 52 years old. Coco's final record stands at 178 wins, 58 losses with 11 draws. He was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 2012.